Well, I wanted to just quickly talk a little bit about my pastor's sermon on Sunday. It was a really good sermon. All of his sermons are really good, and I appreciate almost every sermon I've ever heard in my entire life. But let's just be honest, some of them stick with us more than others, and sometimes things will jump out about someone's sermon more so than others. And I've got some notes here, and if you can see, this is written in crayon because when you have kids and a worship service and they're under 4 years old, a lot of times you have crayons readily available for taking notes. But anyway, there's two things I want to note about this sermon that I thought were fantastic. The first thing was something regarding my son. So my 4-year-old son stays in the service with us, and our 2-year-old does sometimes too, but he gets pretty... he doesn't have like an off switch or like a volume switch. So sometimes we'll take him out just if he's a little bit extra spicy. But anyway, so my pastor was in the book of John, and we're talking about the cleansing of the temple. And so in the cleansing of the temple, the story, at one point, Jesus makes the whip, and he drives out the people that are selling and engaging in commerce in the temple, and he tells them, "Get out!" Like he shouts it. And my pastor, when he was reading this part of the passage, he raised his voice. He's a very mild-mannered guy in general, very much so even-keeled kind of a preacher. But he raised his voice and said, "Get out!" Kind of as if he was imagining what Jesus probably sounded like when he was doing this, because he had such zeal for the Lord. And so my son looks at me, and he kind of got his attention, and he goes, Daddy, Pastor Jerry was being really loud, and he yelled. And I kind of told him, yeah, that's right, because Jesus had such zeal. He was angry about what was happening in his Father's house, and so he drove them out with a loud voice. He wanted them to get out and stop doing what they were doing. And sometimes it's okay to use a loud voice. And so I thought that was so important, because I really want my son to come to understand and come to know the real Jesus, not the fake, surfer dude, like hippie Jesus that everyone talks about. The people like the Jesus that's very, mild-mannered all the time, kind of almost like Spock, just like almost so emotionless sometimes. And that's not the Jesus that the Bible presents. The Bible presents a Jesus who, he wept tears of anger when he saw that Lazarus died. The Bible presents a Jesus that was angry at times because he has such zeal for the Lord and all of that kind of stuff. The Bible presents a Jesus that, yes, did speak gently to certain people, but depending on the circumstances, there were different things that were appropriate for different people. And so the real Jesus is one that I want my son to know. I don't want him to know the hippie, surfer dude Jesus that all he does all day is talk about the lilies and the daffodils. Jesus does talk about the lilies and the daffodils. He invented them. He invented beauty. He invented nature. These things were his idea. So he did do that, but he also was, lots of people, lots of big Eva types that want to tell you that, oh, we need to talk kindly to each other all the time, and we have to talk in gentle tones all the time, and we can't get aggressive at all. All these same guys love that one quote from C.S. Lewis book where it's like is talking about Aslan. Is he safe? No, he's not safe, but he is good. Well, what does that even mean to some of you big Eva types? He's not safe. What does that mean? I know people who've written entire books called "Your Jesus is Too Safe." Okay, I agree with you, but what do you mean by that? Because the Jesus that I know oftentimes spoke in aggressive tones, and that's actually the second point I want to talk about. Again, my pastor was talking about this image of Jesus. So let's just be honest that the cleansing of the temple is a violent scene. Jesus makes a whip of cords, and he didn't do that just for fun. He didn't do that just for effect. He was using it. Okay, so it was a violent scene that we're talking about when it comes to the cleansing of the temple. He did probably shout, "Get out." And so what's that all about? So my pastor made a really good observation, and it's an observation I've thought about before just because of my situations that I find myself in, but I've never quite put it this way. And he said this, he said, look, Jesus, he had compassion on people, especially the crowds. Jesus had compassion on those who were being led astray by the leadership. He had compassion on those common folks that didn't have a copy of the Bible with them. They didn't know necessarily how to read all the time. They believed what they were taught by the Pharisees and believed what they were taught by the leadership and things like that. He had compassion on those people, right? And he had zeal and aggressive words and direct speech and rebukes for those that were leading them astray, for the Pharisees. And if you look, it's probably not completely, every case is like this, but the trend is when he's talking to the Pharisees, that's when he uses aggressive tones. That's when he uses things that insult them to get his point across. That's when he rebukes. When he's talking to the crowds, the common folks, the everyday Joes in the pews, so to speak, Joe Six-Pack in the pews, he has compassion. He has patience. He has gentle words for women when he talks to women who've been led astray by Pharisees. Gentle words. You see, this is the thing, guys. I've been criticized often for this kind of thing, my tone and things like that. But the reality is that even the social justice warriors even get this wrong. They've got it exactly twisted. If you look right now, I bet you, pick any social justice movement, reformed Christian that you want, any one of them, and within the last week or two, they have been vicious and slandered common, everyday folks. The contempt for the man in the pew. I'm talking about the guys who voted for Trump. I'm talking about the guys who are Republicans, who like the Second Amendment. I'm talking about these everyday Joes in the pews, people, just regular folks, the congregations, the crowds. That's who Big Eva is vicious towards. That's who gets called fools by Matt Chandler. That's who gets, they were just so fearful. They were just like biting their nails and they had to vote for Trump and they're just so scared. That's who they rip. You see, that's the exact opposite of what Jesus did. Jesus rips the Pharisees. Jesus rips those who are teaching bad doctrine, who are leading the congregations and the crowds astray. That's who Jesus rips. But who does social justice warriors, who do they rip? They rip you and me. Regular Joes. Regular Joes. That's who they lie about. Jesus didn't lie about anybody. But you see, the social justice warriors, not only are they vicious towards the crowds and the congregations, the regular Joes, but they lie about them all the time. The crowds are who gets called racist. The crowds gets called white supremacists. The crowds are the one. It's always the crowds. It's always the regular Joes like you and me. They're the ones that Big Eva has disdain for, palpable disdain for. You can just see how they think about everyday Joes. I've seen it. I'm telling you, look at any social justice warrior right now. Look at their tweet log in the last 2 weeks. You will find disdain, slander, and just vicious words about the crowds. The exact people that Jesus had patience, kindness, compassion, and gentleness for. And what will you see with Big Eva, the social justice warriors as well? You will see the opposite when it comes to the leadership. Jesus ripped the leadership. Jesus spoke directly to the leadership. Jesus insulted the leadership. He rebuked the leadership. What does Big Eva do? They circle the wagons. They circle the wagons. They don't call anybody out. It's the exact opposite of Jesus' example of what Jesus did. And so, yeah, I absolutely defend the regular Joes that I see out there being ripped by conference speakers, by authors, by seminary presidents, by pastors. God forbid, pastors ripping their own congregations. I've seen people rip their own congregations, calling them fools, laughing and yucking it up about how they had to leave the church because the pastors went too far into this social justice, critical theory stuff. That's sinful, man. That's sinful. That's not what Jesus did. Jesus did the exact opposite. So social justice warriors they're wrong about a lot of things, but this is one of them. This is one of them. Get mad at me for calling out leaders. I don't even lie about them. I even slander them. Nothing like that. I just call them out with aggressive sounding words, just like Jesus did. I'm not perfect, but I'm following Jesus' example. Those who are leading the crowds astray, that's who I rep. I have compassion on the crowds. I feel bad for them. I say it all the time in my videos, man. I feel bad. I say this all the time in my videos. I don't completely hold, black and brown brothers and sisters in Christ that buy into this stuff. I don't completely hold them totally responsible. Yeah, everyone's responsible for their own beliefs, of course. But I feel bad for the people who've been led astray, who've been told by their leadership that it's okay not to forgive, that it's okay to try to take a position of authority in these areas, even when you have none. It's okay to withhold forgiveness and to have these feelings in your heart against the white man because they've held you down, man. They've oppressed you. You're the victim. I feel bad for people who've been taught that because it's bad enough, man. When you're a minority, you have that in you. I have family members like this. You have that in you already. You want to blame somebody else for your problems. That's already inside of you. It's hard enough to live like that. And then you have credible Christians, credible sounding Christians encouraging you in that. It's hard for them, man. I've got compassion for those people. But the people teaching that stuff, I've got rebukes for you. And I think I'm following Jesus' example in that. You are turning Jesus' example on its head, ripping the crowds and protecting the leadership. Anyway, I hope this is helpful. God bless.